Degrees outside at 15 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour on Tuesday, March the 28th. Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program, and we'll be happy to be welcoming back to the studio for the second week in a row, Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer. Good to see you again. Good to see you again so soon. Of course, if I remember to turn your microphone on, it would be even better to not only see you, but to hear you, since this is radio. Let's try that again. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
Yes, indeed. One of us is on top of our game, and it certainly isn't the one talking right now. But so glad to have you in here, obviously, after the representative town meeting that you covered this weekend for the Brattleboro Reformer, and people can read your coverage online at reformer.com. Good to have you in here and switch with Mike Fair. And we're going to do this going forward. It actually lines up better for your schedule covering Select Board. And now that skiing and riding season is over, well, probably
it's not over yet.
It's not over yet, no?
And Killington is going to be open for a little while, so.
So you're going to be out there hitting the slopes as much as possible, right?
Yeah, this week wasn't too great just because of all the rain.
How long do you think you have out there? Right? Say just at Mount Snow, which is your home mountain. How many more weeks do they have?
To mid-April, hopefully.
Until mid-April. All right. Well, that's a good sign. And there is some snow in the forecast as we head to the end of the week here. So we'll see what that does to the folks over there in Dover area. But let's get back to this past weekend now. When you weren't out on the slopes, you were at the Brattleboro Area Middle School multi-purpose room.
Yeah, it started to snow a little bit, and I'm like, oh, God. But still a good time.
But you had to work and do the work that they were covering what the representatives of town meeting were doing for the school board as well as the select board. Mm-hmm. We were just talking a little bit off air about a number of the different things that came up, and the way you couched this kind of beginning at the end with the Indigenous Peoples vote. To you, that kind of summarized the entire day.
Yeah, I mean, there was just such overwhelming support for that article, which was petitioned by a Brattleboro resident, Rich Holshoe, and everyone who spoke in support of passing it. It
was pretty much a lock, right? They had voted the non-binding version of it the year before.
That's right, yeah.
I think a lot of people felt really good about being able to make that official, however, here in the town. So going forward here in Brattleboro, it's Indigenous Peoples Day. It's done, folks.
Yeah.
And which is great stuff. Non-binding, go ahead.
Yeah, the select board wanted to hear from town meeting before they did it themselves, yeah.
It gave it more gravitas to do it in that way, even though it kind of lengthened it. We can go back to the select board meeting right before Columbus Day when Rich Holshoe brought it to them, and they made him do this petition process. But I think in the end, it probably was a better process for the town to have it happen this way. Non-binding resolutions were kind of part and parcel, and they always are, of town meeting here in Brattleboro, and they actually suspended the rules this year to have some of the non-binding resolutions taken up during the school portion because they had to do with Act 46.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little about a couple of those. First of all, what was Andy Davis proposing as far as his non-binding resolution around Act 46?
He wanted the Brattleboro Town School District to do a self-study of an alternative structure, which would just, basically keep the district together in Brattleboro and continue doing business as they are now.
Do you think overall, well, let's say first of all, it didn't pass. It wasn't supported enough to pass this non-binding resolution. And he had support from David Scholes on the school board as well as the select board. But do you think people there who may not have been paying attention to the Act 46 understood the distinction that he and David and other people were making about this alternative structure versus some of the conversations that have been had around Act 46?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, just because, I think ultimately, let me tell you, I think ultimately what killed it was Jill Stahl-Tyler saying, I don't understand what you're asking us to do that we haven't already done.
Yeah.
And they were trying to clarify this one particular section of the law, and it gets, Act 46 gets a little complex, a little muddled in descriptions, and I wonder how many people understood exactly what they were trying to make a distinction of in having this one article emphasized versus what Jill Stahl-Tyler said, which is they've already done this work.
Yeah, and the superintendent backed her up, saying this probably won't pass by the State Board of Education.
Yeah, it definitely would not. I mean, and it's non-binding anyway, so they wouldn't have to act on it. But I think when Jill Stahl-Tyler said that, anybody who had any questions about whether this was or wasn't something that should be done, because you've covered how many Brattleboro representative town meetings now?
I think this is my second.
Okay, second, and so this whole Act 46 discussion has come up during the other business portions of town meeting before, with a lot of opposition from members of the town, if you remember correctly.
Yeah,
including our state representatives who were there. So
yeah.
It's just interesting to me. I mean, it was a relatively close vote. You remember what it was, the vote? I think it was less than 20 people deciding not to move forward with this non-binding resolution. But I wondered how much it had to do with people understanding exactly what they were voting on.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was a 46 to 59 vote.
46 to 59. Now, the other vote by Representative Carville, which did pass. What was the essence of that non-binding resolution?
It was basically asking legislators to help Brattleboro out, saying we did the work here. We looked at a merger with our neighbors, and we don't have anything right now, and please don't punish us for that. So he was saying we, with this resolution, basically help the school district not be forced into a merger by the State Board of Education.
Right. If we don't come up with a merger plan by a certain deadline, the state decides for us. And they were trying to say, make sure that doesn't happen, please. And Tristan Tolino, one of our representatives here, didn't sound so hopeful, did he?
No.
that would happen. But that's very clear as far as and I think that's why that one passed versus the other one didn't. I think if they were able to explain it better, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not judging whether that was right or wrong, that non-binding resolution, because I do see Jill Stahl-Tyler's point that they have done that work. I just don't think it was clear enough to the voters out there. I don't know if you got that sense in the room.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I mean, it probably depends how many people are interested in the issue.
Yeah.
Like, I really couldn't tell.
It was hard to tell there if people were kind of like, using that to go to the restroom during that suspension of rules to talk about it, or checking their phone, seeing if they could get on Twitter and check my brilliant tweets about everything that was going on at.
Well, I think some people were really concerned about putting a time limit on the discussion,
Yeah, that was a discussion before the discussion is how long are we going to discuss this, which is always part of the fun of representative town meeting. One thing that was tangible that came out of during the municipal portion was adding $10,000 to the budget with the advisement that they use this to replace the town energy coordinator, Paul Cameron, and Brattleboro Climate Protection after Paul has moved out of the community. Obviously, this seemed to me to be something that people in the town really supported. And also, and you attend a lot of energy coordinator meetings. This to me seemed pretty well orchestrated by the Energy Committee to bring this amendment up and get support for it. Was that your sense?
Yeah, the Energy Committee chairman's motion was very clear in what it was going to do, and finding a successor organization and making sure it all added up before providing the funds. And a lot of people were they spoke in support of Paul's work in the past, and they're really hoping that will continue, especially with all the projects moving forward that are based on energy efficiency. And I think people want to see more of that work.
It was the first time I can remember since covering representative town meeting that I've seen money added to the budget. And I might be just misremembering there, but certainly seen amendments similar to that proposed in the past, but I mean, that one was passed by a pretty significant amount. And it really didn't seem like the select board or the town was that disappointed in it either. I don't know if, that was your sense in the room.
No, I think the select board has kind of been waiting to hear from the public and what they feel on it. And they also want to have a plan moving forward, like Michael Bosworth's motion.
Yeah. So $10,000 in the end, what exactly is that going to buy them? Assuming that they take the advisement of the town meeting and use it for that purpose, which I guess they don't have to do, but I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll act in good faith on this. But What is the next steps now that they use that money for?
Well, I think it would fund an organization, at least in part. Other grants and funding opportunities might be presented to help the person work more for the town.
Kind of a contract situation more than a staff position is the way I was hearing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seemed to make sense to me. And so they added that $10,000 to the town budget. Now the school, in addition to passing their budget, also had this Australian ballot on a bond for $350,000 to improve the heating system at the Green Street School. But it sounded to me, even because the way it was worded was up to $350,000, didn't sound like it was going to get anywhere near that number to me.
No, they have some grants in the pipeline that they're really hopeful that they'll get.
Yeah. So all in all, pretty smooth town meeting, I thought, this year. Any surprises to you? What stood out to you?
Nothing really. I guess that resolution from George Harvey about taking on the Trump administration.
So what was it? That was I had to tune out because I had somewhere to be by the time they got to other business. What was the Trump resolution?
Well, I think some people were expecting it to call for something different, but his resolution ended up being calling for an investigation into Trump and potential prosecution.
Did he sign up to be the investigator? Is George going to lead this?
I don't know. I think it's on the federal government level.
Yeah. Well, similar resolutions were passed in other towns about you can't get on the ballot unless you disclose your taxes. I mean, there's been a lot of responses, as is the custom, to some national issues here at different town meetings in Vermont. That's what makes the democracy that we have really, really unique here in the state, and it's always fun to cover it, always fun to talk about it with members of the media like Chris Mays as well, but he did cover other stories in the past week. We'll get to those after the bottom of the hour news break here on Green Mountain Mornings. 35 degrees outside at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Green Mountain Mornings continuing now. Your host, Chris Lenois, continuing my conversation with Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer about stories he's covered in the past week, and you can find online at reformer.com. Covered the representative town meeting, I think, pretty well there during that last segment. Don't you think, Chris? We didn't leave anything off the table there that was important.
No, all the budgets passed. No issue, yeah.
I mean, it took 8 hours, but by and large, it was a pretty congenial representative town meeting. And now we turn the page on the Gartenstein to Gray era for the select board here. New leadership at the top with Brandy Starr and Tim Wessel on the board, but Kate O'Connor as the chair of the board. You were at the swearing in and the decision yesterday. Was there conversation around her becoming chair? I saw you tweet out that there was no opposition to her nomination or Brandy Starr as vice chair or Tim Wessel as the clerk, but was there conversation around it?
No, it all happened so quick. The nominations went and went really fast, and there was no discussion really.
How does that work? Who nominated Kate?
John Allen.
John Allen. And then who nominated Brandy?
I forget who that was.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it in my notes. I haven't written the story yet. But.
So to me, that means all this conversation about who was going to be which role on the select board was probably decided beforehand amongst the five of them, executive session or whatever it is that they would call for that sort of thing. If there was no discussion, and I mean, it didn't seem like the nominations came as a surprise.
No.
Yeah, I mean that's all fine, well and good. It's all kind of ceremonial in the end, but it is interesting that there was no discussion around the nomination, and certainly people were prepared to accept the roles they were given.
Yeah. And John Allen did note that it was a good-looking board. So
sounds like something John would do. You should go get a comment from Gartenstein and DeGray about that and start something.
Yeah.
What do you think now about John Allen saying the board is better looking now that you're not on it? Have a little back and forth in the media.
Yeah.
Turn the Reformer into the National Enquirer or something like that. No, just kidding. Stick with real stories like the one that you covered in Wednesday's Reformer last week. Actually, this was the weekend edition of the Reformer when the full story was published, but it had to do with a Wednesday meeting of the Twin Valley schools, Wilmington and Whitingham. And we'd been talking about this before. They had authorized some money during their town meetings to possibly bring a lawsuit against the state. So last Wednesday was the first conversation that they had about whether or not this was a good idea to sue the state of Vermont over Act 46.
Yeah, voters in in Whitingham approved $100,000 for creating a fund.
This is okay. So this is specifically Whitingham. It's not joint towns.
Not yet. Wilmington has said that they are committed to the cause if it's going to move forward.
Yeah. And are they just going to ride the $100K that Whitingham put in, or are they going to pony up some dough? Or
no, they're gonna pony up some dough, but it remains to be seen how that's going to be done just yet.
So I thought you did a really good job kind of laying out some of the conversation. You had James Valenti there, attorney here in town, kind of giving some advice. You had their town attorney, Bob Fisher. I guess first off the bat, what was the decision that was made at the end of the meeting?
Well, the decision was to start a really small committee, I think 3 or 4 members, and see if legal action is feasible. So I think what that's going to result in is an RFP, a request for proposals from different law firms. And James Valenti already voiced an interest in being one of the firms to help them.
So why would they have to contract with an outside firm? Why? I mean, they have a town attorney. They have Fisher and Fisher as an attorney. He would not be allowed to represent them in this case?
He doesn't want to. He's Whitingham's town attorney, not Wilmington's, and his wife is on the Wilmington Select Board, so he wants to help, but he can't. He doesn't want to. Entangled.
No, absolutely. Best to steer clear of any of those sorts of entanglements. I think that makes perfect sense. But and I hadn't realized that connection with the Wilmington board with him, because I'm thinking he's the town attorney. He's on retainer. If the town is suing the state, you would think that why would they have to pay another attorney to do that? But I get that now as far as how that would work. So what sort of questions would they need to answer? Or I guess what sort of questions did they have answered last Wednesday that led them to that decision?
Well, they're being penalized for overspending within the state's calculations, but they're also not. They're feeling like the students don't have all the opportunities bigger schools do.
Right. We've said this figure a couple of different times in conversations with you and in other conversations that have come up. They cut their budget significantly, and their taxes were still going up significantly. Yeah. They would have to cut, I think, another like $750,000
exactly
from their budget. Yeah. And this was the first time I heard this articulated when the school board member, is it John Doty? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Said that would be 10 teaching positions.
Yeah.
I don't know what the faculty is at the Twin Valley School, but I imagine 10 teaching positions is a pretty significant cut.
Yeah, and they might not actually cut all those positions, but all the programming, I mean, it would just be a huge loss.
Yeah, it would be devastating for a community that's already done a lot of the mergers.
Yeah.
So did you feel like, well, first of all, how many people were at the meeting? Was it a good turnout in Whitingham amongst the town?
I counted over a dozen. I think there were almost 20 people with the officials counted.
Okay. That to me doesn't say that it has a really big issue for the town as far as whether or not they should sue the state. If you're talking less than 20 people there from the town coming out for something like this, I mean, you're talking about the true believers versus something that's a real issue for the town.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I'm assuming.
But both towns defeated their budgets, so
that's a good point.
I think there's a message there.
That's yeah. I mean, and that was something that was directed by Whitingham. I think you make a valid point there as far as people wanting to see more affordability in their taxes and taking that note from the select board. So even though they weren't able to come out to this meeting, some tacit approval for moving forward in this direction. Did they give an indication what kind of questions they need to answer? Is it really just a matter of evaluating an RFP, or do they feel from the people who came to the meeting that they have a case?
I think they still want to explore that, and that's kind of going to be discussions with whatever firm they go with.
Right.
The Whitingham Select Board wants the school board to come up with a budget that shows the impact, shaving $250,000 off would do.
Right. I mean, Valenti told them that if any decision came out of this from the Supreme Court, it would be momentous because the Brigham decision was momentous, the one that has created this funding system that we have. But I think you talk to a lot of people and they think it's time for a momentous change in how we fund things. So I can certainly see that coming to play. When are they? Did they give a timeline for the RFP or what their next public action will be?
I'm not sure. I think this month they're going to have the committee get together and then report back to the select board. So maybe late next month they
Probably
might have another joint meeting.
Yeah, sometime after the snow is finally gone and you can't go to Mount Snow anymore. Okay, good to know.
I'll be there on my bike soon enough. So.
Good point. Good point. Let's shift gears to some of the things happening. Well, this impacts all the towns in a way, although a specific story having to do with Brattleboro and doing what they're doing with Wyndham Solid Waste. Kind of, I guess, a complicated arrangement now with the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District, where some things are being managed with the recyclables and then other things are being managed with compost. And this is going between a couple of different providers now, some with the district with compost, some with Casella out of Rutland for recycling. Talk a little bit about what the final decision was.
Well, the town decided to bring its organic waste to the Wyndham Solid Waste District. There's a hope there that they're going to start a big composting facility and take in all the local businesses' food scraps, and they're going to send their recyclables to Casella in Rutland. Now,
Brattleboro have signed a 7-year deal with the district to bring their compost there. And am I reading this right? At less money? Am I reading that right? When I see the tipping fee for the organics drop, is that good for us as taxpayers in this town?
Yeah, no, the district worked with the town to lower the rate so that they could bring it there, so it would work out financially.
Because the other choice would be to bring it down to Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And that would have cost, I guess that's who they were competing with here. And as far as this business, do you think, and you're pretty tight with Bob Spencer and the folks over at the district, is it their plan to compete with places like down in Western Massachusetts for this organic waste?
I'm not sure about that. I know they're interested in getting all the local businesses up there. I haven't heard a more regional plan.
Okay. But certainly Wyndham County, it's the law of the state. All these other communities are going to have to come up with some sort of separation plan for their organic waste versus other waste, right? So they're going to try and eventually get contracts from them as well. Brattleboro's just kind of ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when does that go into effect? Is that immediate? Is this whole deal now with recyclables going up to Rutland? Is this immediate?
Yeah. No, I think it starts in July in the next fiscal year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense indeed. And kind of a similar story that you covered with. Well, I guess we're talking wastewater treatment. I'm thinking waste here, so it's all